The title for today's message is, How Can We Receive God's Best? Let me say it again. How can we receive God's best? And the scripture for today, here we go. It's working. It's in Isaiah 1:19. If you are willing and obedient, you will eat the best from the land. Isn't that what all of us want? We all want the best. But there's an if. If you are willing. Later I'm going to share a personal story of a real challenge that I faced and what the outcome was from initial disobedience to obedience. The key in all cases is we can choose to obey or we can choose to disobey. The decision is up to us. I believe that Kathy this past week shared a great message on prayer. And you might have even heard some people talk about what it meant to them after they got through hearing that message. And it's prayer that starts this thing rolling. And she did a great job. I learned a lot, and hopefully many of you will be able to listen to the message and you'll learn as well. When you spend time with the Lord in prayer, after a while, you'll learn and hear God's still voice. I won't ask people how many of you know his voice, but I'll bet you a majority of you in here know God's voice. It's something else. You'll begin to know your master's voice and you'll know it's his. That's really a key. I believe other than salvation, receiving words from the Lord are right up there in the very top of the things to look forward to. Hearing from God and following his direction leads us into action if that is what we want to do. Hearing from God and walking in obedience is a two-edged sword. Understand that. When you spend time with the Lord, some of the things you will want to hear and some of the things you won't want to hear. And I don't know if any of y'all have gotten a message that you didn't want to hear, but I have, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later on. The key is found in the above-mentioned verse, if you are willing. And that's the key. You have a choice to make. Are you going to obey what the Lord told you? Or are you going to do it your way? You can hear God when you're washing dishes, mowing the lawn, playing sports, or even sleeping. You can hear God's voice. He might speak to you in your sleep. I know, I've seen it, I've felt it, I've heard it. And I'm sure many of you have been awakened to, whoa, what's that? Oh, who? You know? What you have to understand is there are many things that are important to him. Your walk with him, the life you live and lead, and following his directions. As we grow older, and we all are growing older, we should move deeper into a relationship with him through prayer. As Kathy spoke Wednesday on the power of prayer, if I simplify that statement, the power of prayer moves us into even deeper relationship with the Lord. A place where we move to do the will of the Father, and that is the key. The relationship is so important. As God will hear and answer your prayer, he will provide justice for you. He will give each of us directions on how to be and how to walk in demanding situations. Anyone been in a demanding situation? I'm going to even go so far as to say, have you ever been in a situation that if God didn't move, you were going to be toast? How about it? Come on now. I mean, how many of y'all been driving down the street? Just yesterday, I was driving down the street and a box truck that was, right next to me, moved over and hit a truck and threw him into the guardrail. Right while I'm driving down the street, I'm like, whoa, what if I had been just 2 seconds earlier? Just 2 seconds, I could have got hit. So that's what we have to understand. This is how we can receive God's best, by being obedient to the desires of God in your life. So how can we receive God's best? Let's talk about it. We're going to turn to Matthew 21, 28 through 31. If you have your Bibles, you can read along with us, or if not, you can read the slides. The parable of the two sons, 28. But what do you think? A man had two sons like Michael. He's got two sons. And he came to the first and said, son, go work today in my vineyard. 29. He answered and said, I will not. But afterward he regretted it and went. And 30. Then he came to the second and said likewise. And he answered and said, I go, sir. But he did not go. And then 31, which of the two sons did the will of his father? And everyone said the first one. Jesus said to them, assuredly I say to you that tax collectors and harlots enter the kingdom of God before you. You know, if you read your word, he was always talking to the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. And what was the saddest thing? That when they got to that day, when they heard from the Lord, he said, depart from me, I never knew you. That's why it's so important to develop an obedient relationship. Obedience is especially important to God. I believe obedience is a conversation, a transaction between you and God. I say this because only you and him know what he's telling you to do. Now I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say this. The devil cannot interpret your prayers. I'm going to say it again. The devil cannot interpret your prayers. I do not believe that the devil hears your prayers of what God speaks to you. That is for you. The devil understands what God has told you when you speak and you tell what God said to you to others. I believe he can also read what you write down. Those are the two basic ways he gains access to your prayers. With thousands of years in the earth, the evil spirits are particularly good at predicting the common responses of man because they've been at it for such a long time. The devil, after he knows the plan for your life, then attempts to disrupt those plans. Have you all felt that? You know that God has come to you and told you what his plans are for you. And I'll tell you what, I'm not the only one, but you're fighting the devil all the time. He's trying to get you to go back to drinking, go back to smoking, go back to running around, living a wild, raucous life. But the devil's middle name is disobedience. That's one of the reasons he was banished from heaven. The devil wants you to be disobedient. Eve was told by the devil in Genesis 3:1-4, and chapter 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God really say? Have you heard that? Did God really tell you that, Michael, or is that in your mind? You must not eat from any tree in the garden. Second, the woman said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that's in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. 4. And then the serpent said to the woman, you will not certainly die. The devil and human will can be behind our not walking in obedience. Remember, the devil is not omniscient. He is not all-knowing or all-seeing. Only God is. God is the only omniscient one. The devil is not. What is the definition of omniscient? It is one of God's immutable attributes, which is to say, all knowledge of all things is an inherent part of God's character and being. Nothing is outside of God's sphere of knowledge. The word omniscient is defined as having infinite awareness, understanding, and insight. It is universal and is complete knowledge. So the Lord is the only spirit that knows everything or is omniscient. Let me share some thoughts relative to obedience. We're going to change the subject here. So what's the definition of obedience? It relates to hearing or hearkening to a higher authority. One of the Greek terms for obedience refers to positioning oneself under someone by submitting to their authority and command. Another Greek word for obey means to trust. Obedience in Hebrew is shama. which means to hear, to listen, give attention, understand, to submit to obey. There's only one word in Hebrew for obedience, and this word is shama. Another succinct definition of biblical obedience is to hear God's word and to act accordingly. That's where most of us get it wrong. When we hear from God, we don't act on what we hear. What we do is like I'll share with you in a minute, we say, oh, that ain't a God. That's the devil. Sometimes you don't want to hear it, but it's the truth anyhow. True hearing or obedience involves a physical hearing that inspires the hearer and a belief or trust that in turn motivates the hearer to act in accordance with the speaker's desires. So in other words, when you hear from God, you need to move on it. Let me say it again. When you hear from God, you need to move on it. Finally, biblical obedience to God means to hear, trust, submit, surrender to his word. I got a real quick note from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Here's what Dietrich said. One act of obedience is better than 100 sermons. And what that means is when God speaks to you, you need to move. What do the Bible's scriptures say about obedience? Now, I'm not going to read all the Bible scriptures on obedience. I just picked out a few. What does it say? Obedience comes through faith. Romans 16:26, but now revealed and made known through the prophetic writings by the command of the eternal God, so that all the Gentiles might come to the obedience that comes from faith. Obedience can come through suffering. Now listen, this is Jesus speaking. Hebrews 5-8. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. That's Jesus. He learned obedience from what he suffered. Obedience can come through distress. Deuteronomy 4:30. When you're in distress and all these things have happened to you, then in later days you will return to the Lord your God and obey him. How about it? Any of y'all been in distress? Am I the only one that's been in distress? It's been tough. Tests and trials bring obedience. 2 Corinthians 2:9. Another reason I wrote you was to see if you would stand the test and be obedient in everything. How many of us have failed the test? I have. I'll share mine with you. An outcome of obedience may bring death. We don't want to hear that. Like Jesus or the martyrs in Philippians 2:8, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by being obedient to death, even death on a cross. That's tough. We read that, but think about it. It might cause us all to one day lose our life in order to be obedient. Obedience brings blessings. Isaiah 1:19. If you're willing and obedient, you will eat the good things of the land. And that's what all of you want, isn't it? I don't want to go through any more tests and trials and troubling things, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And this is the tough one. The outcome from disobedience may bring curses on one's life. Deuteronomy 11:28. The curse if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God and turn from the way that I command you today by following other gods, which you have not known. Let's get back to God's best. When you think of God's best, what comes to your mind? I know all of you have your thoughts about that. A loving husband or a wife, in a word, a partner. A new car, a new home, more money. Raising your children in a responsible, accountable, biblically based manner. That might be something for you. Bringing your loved ones home like the prodigal son, daughter, or family. Last week we heard a testimony from a person who redeemed their family after being away from them for 15 years. And there are other things that are a blessing to you. Let's turn to Deuteronomy 28:1. We're going to talk a bit about the blessings of obedience and the curses associated with disobedience. God promises 12 blessings for your obedience. and 41 curses for your disobedience. I will read all of the blessings, but I will not read about all of the curses. Some of the curses God will bring upon people to me were extremely gruesome. And I didn't want to share that. It's in here, maybe. But you can read, just read Deuteronomy 28, and you'll see. You can read it for yourselves. Let's talk about the first one. First one. If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all his commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you on high above all the nations of the earth. 2. All these blessings will come on you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. 3. You will be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. Have you folks heard that song, Blessed in the City and Blessed in the Country? It's cool. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, and the crops of your land and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds and the lambs of your flocks will be blessed. Your basket and your netting tray, I guess in the old days they used to take flour and knead it, and it was in a big tray to make bread. Your bread would be blessed. You'll be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. The Lord will grant the enemies who rise up against you to be defeated in front of your face. They will come at you from one direction, but flee from you in 7 directions. Okay. 8. The Lord will send a blessing on your barns and on everything you put your hand to. The Lord your God will bless you in the land that he is giving to you. The Lord will establish you as his holy people, as he promised. He promised you an oath if you keep the commands of the Lord your God and walk in obedience to him. Verse number 10. Then all the people on earth will see that you are called by his name of the Lord, and they will fear you. The Lord will grant you abundant prosperity in the fruit of your womb, the young of your livestock, and the crops of your ground, and in the land he swore to your ancestors to give to you. The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, to send rain on your land in season and bless all the works of your hands. You will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail. If you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day and carefully follow them, you will always be on top and never on the bottom. And finally, do not turn aside from any of the commands I give you today to the right or to the left, following other gods and serving them. And in some cases, that's what we have done. Now, I got all the curses in here, but I'm only going to hit a few of them. I'm not going to read them all. It's too much. If you're not obey the Lord and do not follow his commands and decrees I'm giving you today, all these curses will come on you and overtake you. You'll be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be cursed, and the crops of your land, and the calves of your herds, and the lambs of your flocks. You will be cursed when you come in, you'll be cursed when you go out. The Lord will send on you curses, confusion, and rebuke in everything you put your hand to until you are destroyed and come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him. You know, we always hear God is love, God is love. That's not what that says. God does what he wants to do. And if he wants to curse you, it's going to be a tough thing for all of us. 21. The Lord will plague you with diseases until he has destroyed you from the land you are entering to possess. 23. The sky over your head will be bronze and the ground beneath you iron. That means that you're not going to get any rain. And if you're trying to plant crops, it's going to be very difficult. The Lord will turn the rain of your country into dust and powder. It will come down from the skies until you're destroyed. 29, I'm skipping. At midday you will grope about like a blind person in the dark. You will be unsuccessful everything you do. Day after day you will be oppressed and robbed with no one to rescue you. Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, but you will eat none of it. Wouldn't that be horrible? Have a good piece of roast beef and you can't eat it? Your donkey will be forcibly taken from you, but we don't have donkeys. Your sheep will be given to your enemies and no one will rescue you. 32, this is tough. Your sons and daughters will be given to another nation and you will wear out your eyes watching for them day after day, powerless to lift a hand. That would be horrible. A people that you do not know will eat what your land and labor produce, and you will have nothing but cruel oppression all of your days. The sights you see will drive you mad. I'm kind of feeling that way now. I mean, the stuff that's going on in our country, some of the things people are talking about, I'm not going to get mad, I'm not going to go crazy, but I got to tell you, I've never heard of these things that men and women are doing. We're going to click to the next one. We're going to skip a few. You will sow much seed in the field, but you will harvest little because locusts will devour it. Do you know that the locusts are here this year? I've seen, and the cicadas too, I believe, are here. They're coming through. It may not come through hopefully they don't come through this part of North Carolina, but they're supposed to come through this year. I was reading about it in the paper, but I kind of knew it was going to happen because they had predicted that this was the year that they were going to come. Swarms of locusts will take over all your trees and the crops of your land. The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you higher and higher, for you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. And when you look at our country with a $35 trillion debt deficit, I hope you guys know that, a $35 trillion debt deficit. We've taken entirely too much and we're not getting nothing back. Our debt, I understand, is $1 trillion every 3 or 4 months. That's horrible, folks. It's not sustainable. Okay, we're getting to the end of the curses. 47, because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity. This is a time of prosperity, or it has been. But you have to admit, we have fallen so far as a church. When you look at the horrible crimes that are going on in our country, the Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand. I hope that doesn't happen. A fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. 54, even the most gentle and sensitive man among you will have no compassion on his brother or wife he loves or his surviving children. 56, the most gentle and sensitive woman among you, so sensitive and gentle that she would not venture to touch the ground with the sole of her foot, will begrudge the husband she loves and her own son or daughter. Now you can read some of that up there. That's pretty gruesome. Like 57, that's gruesome. Ladies and gentlemen, we know God is about keeping his word to us. We all love to hear the blessings that we will get from obedience. But the curses of disobedience are now all around us, and we can't handle it. I'm going to tell you a story that looked like a curse to me, but it turned out to be one of the greatest blessings I've ever received. This personal story happened to me in 2007, and I elected in my heart to not obey God. But like the 2 boys in the parable of the 2 sons, as you recall, they were asked to go to the field. One went, and the other stayed behind. In 2007, I was approached about taking an assignment in another country. Kathy and I were, needless to say, excited about it. We began to make preparations as all of the children were out of the house and we could go away by ourselves. Every manager that had the position that I was working in the time of 2007 received a greater position in leadership, and I assumed that would happen to me. One day, an associate that was very close to me, she was very close to me, said that the powers that be would like for you to start drinking with them, let your hair down, and go out with the fellas and hang out. They used to go to the strip clubs. I didn't do that. I told her I couldn't do that it was against my faith, morals, and values to walk like that, so I won't be going out with them. On April 15, 2007, I was praying, and I was about to make a business trip to Memphis, Tennessee to address some issues faced by the distribution center there. While I was in prayer, the Lord told me that while I was in Memphis to begin to look for a new house, as me and Kathy would be moving to Memphis to work there. After I heard that, I said, no, I'm not going to Memphis. This is Memphis. Why would any man in their right mind go up there to fix that? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I did go to Memphis. I made my trip to Memphis. They posted a job, just like God said. They posted a job in Memphis, and I waited until the last minute to submit my resume. I had an epiphany about, well, maybe the Lord wants me to go. My resume was reviewed by the hiring manager for that position, and I was told I didn't qualify. I said, yes. Kathy and I continued to pursue our overseas assignment, even meeting with the hiring manager, and he told me I was the front runner. And that seemed a whole lot better to me than that. Eventually, listen to this, they hire a person for the Memphis role, and I thought that God really didn't want me to go. That it must have really been a demon as they selected a person for the Memphis role, and it wasn't me. Thank you. And they posted her name, they posted her picture, they posted the new role for her, and I said, great. As the story goes, 2 to 3 weeks later, they posted the job again and pulled a lady out of the job. And I said that worried me as the overseas opportunity was delayed and I could see the flames getting hotter behind me to find another job. In December 2007, I'm in a meeting with my boss and peer group, and I had a real bad discussion with my boss. It was ugly. I walked out of there so embarrassed in front of all these men and women. And I could see my time was up in the job that I had in Albuquerque. My wife's mother had lived in Memphis and had relatives there, and Kat said, go get that job. So my manager later comes to me and asks, are you still interested in Memphis? At that time, I didn't have nothing firm, so I said yes. 2 weeks later, I had the job, and January 2008, I was introduced. When I walked into the building and met with the people, it was the saddest thing that you ever saw. There were probably about 400 people in there, but the people came up to me and they said, we've been praying for you to come. They didn't know who I was, of course, but they said, we've been praying for you to come. They had bottles of holy oil, holy water. They had crucifixes. They had Bibles, and they were showing them to. They were opening their prayers. Look at this, look at this, look at this. I said, oh, God. They had been praying God would send someone to clean the place up. I was crying on the inside. The people had been so mistreated. They had rotting food in the refrigerator, dirt in the water fountains. Leaders were choking the associates, and they asked, could I help them? The leader that was over the whole building was in the occult, and she had never been married. So you go ahead and figure out what was going on there. So after accepting the position, I realized what God was wanting me to do. My directions from my new boss were either turn the building around or shut it down, and 550 to 600 people would lose their jobs. He also told me that 3 other people before me, including himself, had tried to fix the problems with the building. Look at it. And none of them were successful. And he told me I had 15 months to turn it around, 15, or shut it down. With that, he said, get her done and good luck. He got in his car and left. I went from a palace to the pit of hell, and yet God was with me. The DC was a mile long. This is how big this building was. It was a mile long, and it was a half mile wide. Every day, truckloads of product were lost inside the building, and 20 trucks a day were lined up to get unloaded. With my first month, a tornado knocked down buildings all around but left us alone. We just lost a tree. I was there 2 days when this hit. I was inside the building. I didn't know with those big windows that they have these gates that come down and they close so that the glass won't shatter in on the people. I didn't know that, but I was inside and I'm like, what's going on here? 2 days and a tornado hits? A fire started in the trash compactor. I'm sitting out there with a garden hose waiting on the fire department of Memphis to come, and I should tell that to Jaquan because it took them a half hour to get there, and we're trying to put the fire out. My supervisors were driving their cars. Listen to this. My supervisors were driving their cars into the building, stealing products and selling them at beauty salons and barber shops in the city. And you had the video cameras that were showing them load the cars. I had people selling bags of dope in the bathrooms, and daily people would pull the fire alarms to evacuate the entire building. They didn't want to work. Obedience to God isn't always easy. It doesn't have to be pretty, but one thing it is, we have God walking with us and advising us on what to do. We had to do a lot of unconventional things to turn it around. The people finally calmed down. Managers could go to church. Some of them got saved, and they could spend time with their families. But I just give you 2 things that I did first. I put my desk out on the production floor where I could talk to the associates, hear their issues, and the line stretched an entire block. They had a lot to say. But the biggest thing that I did was on Sunday when the building was empty, no one was there, I did a prayer walk in and outside the building, and I asked God to come help me because I couldn't do this by myself. You see this mess? Because remember, He sent me there. No one got along with anyone, and the atmosphere in the building was horrible, but after the prayer walk, it changed. God would speak, and I was His hands and mouth inside the building. We located everything, cleaned up the building, and I shamelessly stole Obama's slogan, "Yes, we can," and turned it out to become "Yes, we did." In 6 months, we had it all done. We cleaned up the building, put everything away. Our metrics moved to 100%. God helped, and God gave me favor with the people, and I mean the people on the production floor. One day, the people were all upset. This is why you attack the people problems first. They said they worked that weekend and it was so hot, and they brought me out there. They said, look, there's not a single Coke or a single thing to eat in the machines there. So I'm like, oh boy, how am I ever going to fix this? All of a sudden, an associate walked up to me and said, I got the answer. I said, well, what? He said, get a Pepsi machine. So we put the Pepsi machine in there, and they never ran out of Cokes. They never ran out of food to eat, because when you bring competition into a situation, people don't like it. So the Coke people always made sure those vending machines were full. So anyway, let me kind of wrap all this up. My manager's manager got rid of all my hindrances, my boss, the witch, and in 6 months, the building was purring like a kitten, 9 months ahead of schedule. So what happened? What happened for me? We went through the test and came out successfully from the wilderness. Remember, Jesus is a rewarder of those that diligently seek Him. I actually, after we got it all cleaned up, had United States senators come into the building to see how DC should operate. And even though I was a major component of what happened, all I got to do was shake the man's hand. Everybody else explained everything to him. I bought a barbecue grill for the building, and our associates placed third in Memphis in May barbecue cook-off. I don't know if you know it, but in Memphis, there's a big deal called Memphis in May. And our people, the production associates, once I bought the grill, cooked so well. They got third place amongst, I'd say, over 100 people. So when you start watching all these Food Network programs and they talk about all the awards they win, Memphis in May is a real big one. They normally remove leadership when they turn 55. I went into the building at 54. I left when I was 58. All the folks that worked with me were laid off. All my peers were laid off by the time I got through. When I left, just like the Israelites, I left with plenty of silver and gold. Kathy was able to stay at home, take care of her mother. You've heard the situation about what Kathy was dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's with her mother. And Kathy was able to stay home and take care of her mother. And as you recall, you've heard the stories about Michael. So not only did we have a tough job, we had a situation with dementia and Alzheimer's, Michael with epilepsy and whatnot. Michael got healed while we were in Memphis. 3 children found love and got married in Memphis. Remember I told you 3 got married in 12 months? We went from the bottom to the top. And what I want to share with you is that Jesus walked with me in that fiery furnace. He burned off the impurities I had so that we could come out as pure gold. And last but not least, most importantly, this was the greatest assignment I'd ever taken. I'd never had so much fun and things work out the way they did. The woman that I'll call affectionately the witch came up to me 2 or 3 years later and said, "Hey, I got to tell you, I never could have done what you did." Well, look at folks who I brought on the scene. Here's my big brother over here. He's telling you and working with you. She came to me and said, "I could have never done that." And you say, "Well, what happened to the building once you left?" They sold it. That's how big business is. They sold it. And everybody left the company I was working for and went to work for FedEx, of which they were very unhappy. Well, yeah, Kathy was saying, "What'd you do for the employees?" I bought tickets. I used to have catfish fries. They like things in the South that I can't eat, like neck bones and collard greens and fried. I said, "Look, I'll buy you some good food. Don't eat neck bones." They wanted the neck bones and the turkey drumsticks. I said, "Well, let's at least have some fried chicken for Mike. Mike don't eat those things." But, God was good. I initially said no, and then I said yes. And then I can tell you it was the greatest thing that happened to me. Then I want to thank my wife, because there were times that we faced. Our church back in Memphis, they would open the doors I guess it was every day. And any man or woman that wanted to just walks up in there and they could have prayer. And I would actually see angels walking around in that building when the lights were out. You just see them. Well, one day something bad had happened. I won't go into any of that. And I was so distressed and just tore up. I could not pray. So I said, "Kathy, you got to pray for me," because it was too much. But God and but Kathy. Finally, how do we receive God's best? By developing a relationship with God through prayer. Boy, that's a big one, y'all. Listening to what he tells you, then acting upon what he tells you to do. You may not like what he tells you to do, but by listening to his voice and doing what he tells you to do, it'll work out for your best. When you trust God, you don't get any passes. Let me just say this. There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts, y'all. You don't get any passes, but you must do it God's way. So take the risk that you may be in your path. Do not worry about how people treat you. As when I went to God for justice, God eventually removed everyone I had complained about. Their positions meant nothing to God. He got rid of them for me, and then I left. There's a great work that God expects you to do, but the risk is commensurate with the reward. And finally, Hebrews 5:8. I read that before. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And I'm going to share this with you. You learn more in the bad times than you do in the good times. Think about it. When you look at all the challenges that you personally have faced, you remember the lessons you learned when you were in that furnace. And I would just tell you, be obedient. Take the risk. It's worth it. And so with that, I close.